Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another British Board of Agreement webinar. It's a different face you see today. I'm standing in for my colleague Pete. My name is Katie Roberts, and I'm also in the marketing team at the BBA. And we have a lot of very interesting things to share today. We, as you know, at the BBA, we are very passionate about understanding what's happening in our space, in our industry, in our marketplace, and taking any opportunity we can to speak to people who are truly driving change. So I'm thrilled to be able to be joined by Anthony Taylor from the Building a Safety Alliance today. So Anthony, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Katie.
Good. So we're going to just, I'm not going to spend too much time doing the introduction because I know that Anthony, you've got a lot of very interesting things to share for us. So while I just get while I get my screen shared, I hope all our viewers can see that. So that's all good. Perfect. So today we are talking about the Building Safety Alliance, as I said, and in particular, the Working Group 8 and what that means for construction. So just a super quick high level, if this is the first time that you are joining one of our webinars today, welcome. We run these very regularly. If you have missed any or you want to know what's coming up, we have a dedicated page on our website, bbasearch.co.uk/webinars. You can register for future ones. You can see what you've missed. But we run these webinars regularly. But if you have not joined any and you just want to know a little bit more about what the BBA does, a reminder, we've been in business since the 60s, and we've been working with the entire construction and manufacturing supply chain, helping them to mitigate risk and build confidence in the products that they develop and put out to market. We form long-term partnerships with a lot of the organizations in our industry space. We believe in a joint up collaborative approach. And obviously the organization itself has been, because it's been running for so many years, we have built up an extensive amount of knowledge and insight covering, I think the last count was in excess of 200 product sectors. So we offer a wide range of services. I think most people know us for the Agreement certification, so it's product certification, but we also offer a lot of product testing, audit and inspection. So that's post-certification, physically going to production facilities, physically going to site, and just checking and working with organizations who want us to sense check and inspect work that is being carried out. We also help with various management systems, so your ISOs, and of course UKCA marking, which is a big topic on everyone's lips at the moment. So we help our industry with that as well. Quick snapshot to date, we have issued, since we started, we've issued over 6,000 certificates. We have, well, it's more than 130, it's over 170 people that work for the organization, and we work with clients that represent over 70 countries worldwide. So, you know, people really see, organizations see the importance of product certification as a gateway to enter into the UK market, and we've been proud to help them and enable that innovation with them as well. So brings me to today what we are covering. As I said, thank you, Anthony, for joining us. We're going to be looking at WG8 and the Building Safety Alliance. We're going to be talking about, or rather, Anthony's going to be sharing more about the Building Safety Bill, the Fire Safety Act, the building safety managers and what that means for in our environment, and obviously what in occupation means. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we want to talk about, and at the end we will be, as usual, having our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the question, log them as a question on your dashboard itself. But I think without me any further ado, what I want to do, Anthony, is make you the presenter so you can talk us through the slides, and take over from me so I can talk less and you can tell us the all-important stuff that we need to know and why we're here. So over to you.
Can you see my screen, everybody?
We can, yes, absolutely. So loud and clear, off you go. That's great.
I'm off. Katie, thanks for that introduction, and thank you all for joining in. I'm going to whiz through quite a lot of stuff quite quickly, and should Katie want, she can distribute these afterwards. But I'm basically, as you said, going to speak to you about Working Group 8, how that's morphed into the Building Safety Alliance and building a PAS, and what the BSM, which is the Building Safety Manager, is expected to do. So originally, you will recall the Hackett report after Grenfell, and she was very, very clear about the lack of general competence across the piece, right the way from the very beginning of designing, constructing, and the people managing the occupation. So her report was fundamentally looking to make people accountable, and in order to be accountable, of course, you need to be competent to do so. So industry set up the competence steering group, and there's a load of acronyms, and I won't go through them all. But the industry safety steering group was chaired by Jane Judith Hackett, and it was there really to say, I've given my report, industry, you've got a lot to do, government, you've got a lot to do, but I'm going to set this steering group up to make sure that industry is challenged on a regular basis about progress along the lines set out in her report. So these CSG, the Competence Steering Group, was set up, operated by the CIC, the Construction Industry Council. And I was honoured to be asked to chair Building Safety Managers Working Group 8. And the task of all those working groups you see there was to examine the existing competencies that were in the industry sector and to upgrade them, check them, etc., and make sure they were fit for purpose. As you will all no doubt know, there's an awful lot of guidance and Lord knows what out there. So the whole exercise was to go right the way through the industry and try and make sure that everything is compatible, there's an upskilling, and the competence level is raised generally. As you'll appreciate, the building safety manager was a brand new position. So we started with an absolutely clean sheet, and our job was to come up with, what do you think a building safety manager is? What are they going to do? And to come up with a framework for the competences of that. So we were formed in June 2018. And I say the first thing we sat down to do was really try and work out what the BSM is, who are the people they're likely to be interacting with, what are their responsibilities in managing a property, what the potential liabilities of these people, because of course they need to be insured. Discussed who may become an accountable person. An accountable person is effectively what is generally known in the trade now as the client, but is defined now in the new Building Safety Bill as the person who owns the building. Fundamentally, there's a clearer definition, but fundamentally it is the person or the organisation that owns the building. If it's an organisation, then that organisation must appoint an individual who has the overall responsibility, hence the name accountable. So we set about it, having worked all that out, and on the working group we had the HSE and MHCLG, as it was in those days, members of our Home Office, and a very wide range of people from the industry. And we were trying to work out what the competence level would be necessary for somebody to stand in the role of a building safety manager. We delivered an interim report as part of the wider Raising the Bar report, and delivered a final report at Setting the Bar. Ours was Annex A of this whole thing, because starting from, as I say, from a clean sheet. And our report, which I can circulate if you want, but frankly, things have moved on since we wrote that. And I'm very pleased to say that a lot of the recommendations we made have been taken up. And where they haven't been taken up by the policymakers or the regulator, then we've tried to take them forward on our own, which is the raison d'etre of the Building Safety Alliance. So the Building Safety Bill, for those who haven't had the pleasure of reading it, we had an original one came out last year. There was one early this year, and a revised version has just come out last week. But fundamentally, it's in 5 parts and with loads of schedules, which are all the detail. The bit that is looking at the construction end is Section 3, Part 3, the the Building Act changes. And this makes changes to the Building Act and a number of other existing legislative requirements. Part 4 is aimed at higher risk buildings, the occupation thereof. Part 5 is about other provision of safety standards and things, and includes stuff like construction products. A lot of work is going into defining and refining the competence around the people who sell construction products and the people who procure them. So that is a significant change. So I'm not going to go through that in great depth, but you can see it's a pretty big read. And if you do choose to read some of the detail, I would suggest you read the commentary first, which explains what they're trying to achieve, because of course the bill itself is written in legalese. The timescale for all of this is basically expecting to have the whole thing live around about August 2003. So the bill is currently doing what they call ping pong between the Commons and the Lords. There's been a parliamentary select committee to go through it and make recommendations, and some of those recommendations have been taken forward in the bill that was revised and published a couple of 2 or 3 days ago. But as you can see, that it's unlikely to come in a big bang per se, and they're going to dribble different bits and pieces of the legislation in, so it's not too much of a shock. Most of the industry is pretty well aware of what is expected, and government's view is, you know what's coming, so start preparing. As Hackett has said, don't hang around. You know in your heart of hearts what's wrong and what needs to be done, so get on with it now. So for those of you who are involved with the construction, Gateway 1 has already come into place, which I think was on the 1st of August this year. Gateway 2, which I'll come on into a minute, is coming in, I think, spring this coming year, and then Gateway 3 later on. I'll explain what those things mean. But as you can see from there, there's an awful lot of new legislation. In the last month, there have been 2 tranches coming out of government.gov.uk, which you can go and get all of these and read them, but they're quite complicated. There's an enormous amount of information coming out. Our organisation, the Building Safety Alliance, and others are feeding back, so because it obviously hasn't come to the final point yet. So we are down in the weeds trying to understand how this can be done and delivered on a practical basis. So that's the timeline. We've not got that long, August 23, and people need to be competent by then. Working Group 8, we basically delivered our report, which had a draft competence framework, and that was given to the BSI, the British Standards Institute, where they are working up a PAS called 8673. There are 3 PASs and what they call a flex. So the flex, which sits right at the top of all of the forthcoming guidance and PASs, which is called Flex 8670. So all the competence requirements and all the industry stuff that I've just been talking about needs to map against 8670. And we are now working in various groups to deal with PAS 8671, which is with regard to principal designer work, 8672 with regard to the principal contractor work, and 8673, which is to deal with the building safety manager. So the development, the 8673, which is the one I'm heavily involved with, we've been out to public consultation. We're going through the responses to that, and we're, as I say, trying to refine that into a number of competencies, and we will be issuing some guidance on that once it all comes out. We are expecting 8673 to be out in public, for public use in January, this coming January. The point being that people need to look at it if they wish to become a building safety manager, in order to sort of do a self-analysis of their gaps, gap analysis, and get further training before they then go and get assessed by a certificated assessor. If you're successful in the assessment, we will then, through the Building Safety Alliance, create a national register. And what we're doing in the Building Safety Alliance is the second work stream for the rump of Working Group 8, is to set up this not-for-profit, properly governed, industry-led organisation, which will, let's say, own and manage the PAS competencies. We'll probably set up a scheme, and then we'll appoint a number of people to undertake assessment. When people are proven as competent against PAS 8673, we will then create a register and we'll put them on that. And of course, there'll be all the governance around register. If people misbehave or fail or what have you, they'll be taken off it. We had the inaugural meeting on the 15th of March. We've got a number of observers so that we are in constant contact with the policymakers and the regulator, and indeed the Welsh Assembly and others. in order to try and develop what is necessary as quick as we possibly can, so that as soon as the PAS comes out, we're in a position to offer a method of certification. So that's I think I've covered that. Mainly, the PAS was completed on the 15th of September. There were about 400, nearly 400 comments. We've got to go through each one, which we are. Some are very sensible changes. Some of them are out of the scope of the work that we can do. And that we will respond to the people who do it. But publication is planned for December 21 or January 22. Excuse me. As I said, the Building Safety Alliance is an independent not-for-profit, and it's led by an industry. We've got about 45 members of professional institute, trade bodies, and various of those sorts of people who put representations into this Grand Council. And we are working towards these certification of individuals to start with, and then we will go on to look at the certification of organizations. Because as you know, both, as I have said, the accountable person, who's the owner of the building, can either be an organization or an individual. Similarly, a building safety manager, the function can be undertaken by an organization or an individual. But if it's undertaken by an organization, they have to appoint somebody called a nominated individual. So the nominated individual within a BSM organization, for a better word, or an individual BSM, there's an individual operating under their own, have to be competent at the same level. We will then put them on the National Register and as per the certification. The second stage, which is almost running concurrently, is to look at how, cast the ruler over organizations who want to take on the role of the building safety manager. Phase 3, which might interest you guys, is that we are looking with others to see how that we can certify the competence of the individuals who are going to work in HRBs, which are higher risk buildings, not high rise, higher risk. The point of that is one understands that the people who would come, and it may be a fitter of some description or other, or a consultant coming to do something, they will be competent in the discipline that they are working, but they may not have the knowledge or the special understandings that are necessary because of these higher risk buildings. So we're looking at a way of just topping up, for want of an expression. It's not so much the competence of the discipline you're operating in, it's actually it's the competence to work and take responsibility for work in these higher risk buildings. So we'll be accountable for the full governance regime, because otherwise it don't work. We'll have a full code of conduct and a robust complaints procedure. We are not trying to create a new professional institution. It is a robust system to ensure that those who undertake or wish to undertake the role of being a building safety manager are competent to do so. And they'll be expected to go through it again, probably either 3 to 5 years. Led by it'll be those who actually undertake the certification will be subject to UCAS Engineering Council. And the Alliance, as I say, we might issue, one of the things we're talking about is ID cards. Rather similarly, if you're a resident in one of these buildings where you're wanting to be safe, you might, someone knocks on your door, says, I'm your building safety manager. We're thinking we're gonna need some sort of formal card, perhaps, to assure residents, which is the aim of all of this work, is to have safe residents in safe homes. But that includes, being able to make sure that the people who are dealing with them are registered and accountable. Within construction, as I've mentioned, there are gateways. Gateway 1 is quite simple in the fact that it is right at the very beginning at the concept of almost a blank field. When you're looking there, you're going to be required to provide a fire plan, it's called, which is basically the brigade having a look to see that they can get the tenders in place, that the water pressure is right, the hydrant's in the right place, and that the building you're going to build is not going to either threaten or be threatened by its neighbours. So that's Gateway 1. Gateway 2 is a fully designed building in its entirety, up to building regs, all fully signed off, and you have to put that to the regulator, and the regulator will decide whether or not they are content that that is designed with safety in mind, and it'll be a rigorous check. And they will then give permission to go on site. So you cannot get on site. It's a hard stop for the project. And that's the point where CDM duty holders will be appointed. You're then on site for however long it takes. Gateway 3 is completion. And at that point, again, the regulator is going to manage completion. And part of the completion is the golden thread, which is something you may well have heard about. So the golden, let me just carry on there. So the, hang on a minute, I'll just get something up there on my screen. So having completed the building and gone to the regulator, and he or she has signed it off, it goes into occupation. So where you have the client under CDM, and there are additional client requirements under CDM in the new bill, the new duty holder in occupation is this accountable person, the person who owns the building, or where there's more people who own areas of the building, one of them will become the principal accountable person. And they have to appoint a building safety manager. As I say, the BSM can be an individual or an organization. The owner, the accountable person, has got to register the building. And this goes as well for existing stock. So if there's existing stock of 18 meters or 7 stories high, then that building is going to have to be residential. So this bill only deals with the residential part of buildings that are 18 meters or 7 stories high. So the accountable person, the owner of that building, has got to register it with the regulator. They will have to create the golden thread. This is the safety case. They will have to undertake a building risk assessment. This is a new concept. This building risk assessment is not a collection of all the fire risk assessments. It's not the health and safety one. This is a new concept along the lines of a safety case process. You've got to appoint the BSM, having checked that they have got all the right competencies. You've got to deliver something called the tenant engagement strategy, and there has to be a reporting and complaints process. So that's the accountable person's basic duty. But it is understood that many of these owners will not actually be professional property managers, for want of a better expression. So they have to appoint the building safety manager who's going to do all of that stuff on a daily basis for and on their behalf. Does that sort of make sense? Does that make sense to everybody? So the building safety manager is appointed by the accountable person to deliver the duties of the accountable person. The safety case report is a report that goes before you can occupy a building, and there is a transition period yet unknown for existing stock. There is a safety case report. So the safety case golden thread is a collection of all the information you may need to operate the building, which is all the plans, all the certificates, all the fire management systems, etc., etc., etc. And the safety case report is effectively a report going to the regulator to say, here is my case for you giving me permission to occupy this building. And if the case is proven, and it will cross-refer back to the golden thread where all this information is collected, and they will check it very carefully. They will look at the colorized, the accountable person. Are they engaged with this process? Is the building safety manager competent to undertake this role? And they will issue a building assessment certificate, which is effectively the permission to occupy. The golden thread, as I've said, it starts right at the beginning of Gateway 1 and it builds up all this sort of information. I'm just going to read a very quick list which came out in the last thing, but I haven't managed to get the slide. So it's all the stuff that comes from the original planning permission, a copy of fire statements, the plans and documents which are approved, the building control, any changes that were made and agreed, and a signed declaration from the principal designer, the principal contractor and the client that this building stacks up to building regs and is compliant. And if the accountable person doesn't have, so where we have existing stock where the owner does not have this sort of information, they've got to go away and get it. The assumed content, right, the point of the bill here is to stop spread of fire and structural collapse. And the duties are to ensure that in the event that one of these incidents happens, that there is mitigation to stop it. Now that sounds a bit obvious, but in a building where it should be properly compartmented, the fire, should one break out, should be limited to that compartment. However, as in the case of Grenfell and of course a number of other places, the fire's got out of the compartment and spread through the building very rapidly. So this bill requires that the accountable person, and therefore the building safety manager, has systems in place to make sure that they can prevent it if it breaks out of the compartment or the building doesn't behave as one's expected. It's got to include all of this in the golden thread is a safety management system. You'll all be aware of those, but the detail of information that's going to be required, the safety case, aka the golden thread, is going to be digital. It's a requirement to be digital. It'll set out prescribed information and a prescribed format. So the amount of information that is going to be needed when one does completes a construction work or refurbishment work is going to be much higher and much more detailed, and it's going to be checked. The golden thread needs to include the processes of managing all of this stuff as well as the components. Oops, sorry, the wrong way. Just to give you an idea of the interaction of these things, you've got the building safety bill there on the left, and you can see it interacts with the RRO and indeed the Health and Safety at Work Act. Now, we have put that yellow line there really just to illustrate the thing that is not a firm guide, and as I've said, that the bill is still going through process. So you can see that one way and the other, even though the building safety bill is only looking at residential properties over 18 meters with regard to fire and fire spread and structural, it is so integrated with everything else that the whole system provides safe residences and safe residents. But in the event that something goes wrong, the prosecution might come from various different routes. What we're trying to do here is to work through what might be part and parcel of the golden thread. Those of you who've been part and parcel of moving properties from one ownership to the other will be faced with demands for information about, you know, how many assets of this type have we got, how many assets of that, have they been properly maintained, where are they, what are the records, and all of that. There's obviously an issue about paying for all of this. The bill provides for something called the building safety building safety charge. Now, there's been a lot of pushback of that because, of course, residents are very concerned that they might get double charged for stuff they should already be paying through the service charge. But we're going to get much more clarity in due time on what is actually going to constitute the building safety charge. But fundamentally, we're coming from the Alliance, coming from the point where this building has got to be safe, and the residents have got to feel safe in it. So this is, you have to excuse my graphics, because I'm not very good at that, but you can see the complexity of all this stuff. You might have more than one accountable person, so they've got to push information up to the principal accountable person. The principal accountable person will be holding all this electronic information. Yeah. And into that, you guys are going to be pushing information for refurbishments, perhaps PPMs, or if there's a further development that's put on the side of it. And then one's going to have to go back and reconsider the safety case report, which, if you recall, was going to the regulator to ask for permission to occupy. Because if the risks have changed within this building due to whatever's been built or changed or refurbished, then we're going to have to reconsider the method of managing it. The building safety manager, as I say, is appointed by the accountable person. And it's been absolutely clear, while the building safety manager might be responsible for carrying out certain duties, in fact, those duties will be by way of contract through the accountable person. They're not going to be set out in law. The accountable person will contract the building safety manager to do what he wants him to do. And one of the reasons for that is, as I say, that the focus is on fire and structures. But if you've got a highly competent person there, you might want them to do more. Let's say the lifting equipment, the Legionella, the water hygiene, all that sort of thing. So, but that is outside the building safety bill, but it is, of course, inside all the other regulations. But the fundamental responsibility of the building safety manager, having been appointed, is to deliver those things down the left-hand side, the tenants engagement strategy, and that is more than the sort of standard document that has been given that here's your evacuation plan and the dry cleaners are down the road. It's much, much more than that. It's actually how you're going to do it, how you're going to engage with the tenants, how you're going to discuss potential costs, etc., etc., etc. And the building safety manager has a responsibility to tell the accountable person, not forgetting his boss, that's his boss effectively, or her boss, when and if they think a risk is changed, or whether the mitigation factors and the management systems are inadequate, and you have to go through them again. And if the accountable person doesn't respond, he's duty bound to talk to the regulator about it. So there is a built-in conflict of interest perhaps there, which we've advised the policymakers, and they basically said, well, that's not the only conflict of interest in the world. We've got to recognise it and understand it. Oops, I keep going the wrong way. Sorry. As I mentioned, the contractual relations and contractual relationship. Does the accountable person want the person to do traditional property facilities management oversight as well? How are they going to manage the golden thread and the data management? As you can see from there, there's going to be a lot of data management. A lot of you will be aware of the increase in sensors and various other matters in the Internet of Things that are being built into buildings. All this will start feeding into this golden thread collection of information. So fundamentally, the accountable person and the BSM, they're going to have to work out whether they want to deal with regulations only, as in the regulation of the Building Safety Bill, fire, spread, and structural safety, or do you want to contract them to do a lot more or less than that? So, you know, where people are thinking about this, they need to think quite carefully of what it is they're expecting these people to do. These are just quick models, roughly, as you can see how it might work out. You've got boards of companies who might appoint managing agents to undertake this role. Managing agents are going to have to prove that they have the people who are competent to deal with it. Within social housing, a common model that is developing is because they already have, in many ways, all the resources to deliver this role. They've got a head of fire, they've got a head of structures, they've got surveyors, they've got a head of asbestos, which is outside this bill, but you need that information in order to manage the building safely. So they will employ a nominated individual to marshal all those resources to deliver the function on behalf of the organisation. There are small organisations like Right to Manage and what have you, where it won't be complex enough, quite probably, to have a full-time building safety manager. So they might outsource a building safety manager function and contract to have a number of hours a month or whatever it happens to be, to make sure that the accountable person within that organisation is being able to deliver their duties. And I've whizzed through that. So there fantastic. We are. Have you got any questions?
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much. I'm going to just take back the screen just to see if we've got any questions.
Yeah, please do, and I'll try and stop sharing, and then I can have a look at you all. How do I do that?
Perfect. So you don't need to do anything. I've taken back, so I think our viewers should just be able to see your and my face on their screens at the moment. So Anthony, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. I know that we slightly over time, but I'm sure our viewers will be thankful. Lots of information in there, lots of really interesting stuff, and lots of things to take into account, how we can all kind of get involved and support. We just got a couple of questions, Anthony, for you. Yeah. The first one is, what I'm sure, setting up a competency framework of anything, any type like this is no small feat. What has been the response to this? I'm sure you sense checked it. It's been sense checked with a lot of different initiatives and organizations. What's been the response to the setting up the competency framework for the building safety manager? What is the general reception?
Well, there's two. I'm taking it's two questions there. Fundamentally, people are generally in agreement that competence across the industry has got to rise. I mean, we've got to this, and within a thing that really needs to be recognised, the competence that we recognise easily is skills, knowledge, and experience. What is being added to this by all this work is behaviours, and we are all working very, very hard to understand how we can judge and monitor people's behaviour. Because fundamentally, you can have all the skills, knowledge, and experience in the world, but if you don't have the integrity to do the job correctly, you're no use to anyone. Yeah. And fundamentally, the thought around industry generally is we've got into this position because there are those out there who don't take their responsibility, and it's got there. So there's a general acceptance we need to upgrade competence. The difficulty is setting it at the right level, because we are looking at two levels at the moment. One is for buildings that are built to design by approved document B, and the higher level of competence for buildings which are, have design in principle for fire, but are outside the regulations, if you're with me. So it's the difference between I use this word with care, a not so complex building, and we know exactly how it's been built and why it's been built, and a building perhaps like the Shard that has been built with a lot of designed special fire and structural safety. So you need to know a bit more to run something like that. Does that answer the question adequately?
It does. Thank you. Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's a hard line in the sand. You've got a deadline, August 2023. Where would you say, how are we tracking along to meet that deadline? Where would you say, is everything kind of falling into place, or are there still some areas that require a considerable amount of work?
I'm being tracked almost on a daily basis, but the reality is we aim to do it. We've got a hard stop in the sand to get it ready by December for publication in January. Because we can't January this next year, because once we've got the competence framework, we've also got to set up the method of assessing people are competent against that framework. So that is the two lines of the Building Safety Alliance grouping. The powers involves lots of other people as well as members and representatives on the Building Safety Alliance, but the regulator is not going to hold a register. So someone's got to, and they just said, well, industry better do it. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
So I would say, yes, we are on track. There's a long way to go and a great deal of work yet to be done. But there's a great deal of work being done by right across the industry.
Fantastic, thank you. And one other question we've just had come in as well. Will some building owners have a building safety manager in name only, where all functions are delivered by various teams? So you may have a single BSM for many buildings, for 100 buildings. Would that kind of scenario be?
Well, if the accountable person, the owner, has to appoint a building safety manager. That's a requirement, unless he's going to do it himself or herself. So let us assume it's a managing agent, just for the want of a better expression, because we know that model. They will have to appoint the managing agent to deliver that role, provided they have the competence. There is not going to be a measure of one competent person to X number of buildings, although, dare I say it, I'll put my neck out and say, 1 to 10, depending on the complexity of the building, it might be 1 to 1. If something like the Shard, you're not going to have, a few hours a day doing that, are you? I mean, it depends on the complexities of the building. So one can take the view that a competent individual, be it a BSM individual or a nominated individual within the organisation, and this is really part of the integrity. You should know, you'll be competent, and you will know the limit to your own capacity. You've got to turn around and say, I can't take on building number 17. And they've got to go away and do it. So there are different models. There's nothing to stop an organisation having thousands of them, but when they go to the regulator and the same name crops up 1,000 times, and the backbone of this bill is to understand that somebody competent is overseeing all this and has a real feeling for the risk management of that individual building and the residents in it, it's going to be quite hard to oversee that and satisfy a regulator. And until you satisfy the regulator, you don't get the permission to occupy. So we have made the recommendation, the Alliance has made the recommendation about 2 weeks ago, that it should be a requirement in law that the regulator specifically looks at that ratio. I await to find out what their answer is. But at this moment, there is nothing to stop one person being responsible for everything, other than the fact that you've got to go to the regulator and get them to agree that you can do it. But I come back as an individual and say, you've got to look after your own integrity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and Anthony, I think that ends on a good note. I think there is a degree of responsibility and accountability that needs to be taken.
Absolutely, this is all about accountability of individuals and being responsible right the way through, from the lowest to the highest. And I would just add, Kate, if anybody has a particular further question that they want, or they get, comes to their mind in a week or two or a month or two, then if they come through you back to me, then I will help anybody as best I can.
Perfect, absolutely, and thank you, Anthony. And if anyone does need a confirmation on the contact information to get hold of Anthony, either give us a shout, or this will be recorded. This is being recorded, so the contact information will be at the end of the video as well. So on that note, Anthony, I realize we have overrun a bit, but I'm really thankful for your time. Really appreciate your insight and sharing a little bit more. Lots of work to be done, lots of work already done, and we're excited to hear about the successful next stage and publication of that. Good luck with December and January as you guys kind of
forge on with. Thank you for listening, everybody. I hope it was of interest. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us. This will be available on our YouTube channel and obviously on our website. That website link again, bbacerts.co.uk/webinars. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day. Take care.